Hello, welcome to Fort Lee Client Services Division's briefing on how to successfully complete your military naturalization documents. Please know that this briefing does not constitute legal advice, nor does it substitute the need to sit down with an attorney from our office to carefully go over your documents. All of your USCIS documents should be typed. However, if you must handwrite your documents, please ensure you use black ink to print clearly in all capital letters. The G1145 is only required if you plan to mail your application packet to USCIS. It allows USCIS to contact you by telephone or email. If you plan to file your N400 online and upload your other documents, you do not need to complete the G1145. The N426 is the first step in becoming a U.S. citizen through qualifying military service. Every section must be filled out correctly or else USCIS could reject it. Part 1 on page 1 contains your personal identifying information. Question number 11 asks for your physical address. Here, it is very important that you list the address where you are located when asking for N426 certification. For example, if you are at Fort Lee for AIT when you ask for N426 certification, you must list your Fort Lee address. Part 2 on page 2 asks for your enlistment information, including where you enlisted and where you resided when you enlisted. Specifically, question number 3 asks if you have re-enlisted. Please note that the answer should be no unless you have a DD-214. Part 3 on page 2 asks for information about your branch of service and type of service. For example, if you are in the Army, your branch of service should state Army. Your service start date should be the date you signed your enlistment contract. Your service end date should not be the end of your contract, but rather should state present because you are currently serving in the United States Army. Your type of service is asking whether you are active duty or reserves or National Guard. If you enlisted as an active duty soldier, check the box that says active duty. If you are reserves or National Guard, check the box that says selected reserve of the Ready Reserve. Part 4 on page 3 asks about your contact information and contains your signature and the date you signed. If you only have a cell phone number, it is important to fill out number 1, requester's daytime telephone number, using your cell phone number. For number 2, requester's mobile telephone number, you will again put your cell phone number. For number 3, requester's email address, you should list your personal email address for ease of contact. For requester's signature, you should be signing with a pen, a wet signature, and putting the date which you signed it. Please note that the date you signed should be before the date of the colonel signature on page 4. Once you sign part 4 of your N426, return it to your drill sergeant so that they can give it to the brigade to complete parts 5 through 8. Even though you will not be completing parts 5 through 8 yourself, it's important that you understand what USCIS is asking and ensure that it was actually filled out correctly. Part 5 is asking about the character of your service, specifically whether or not you have served honorably. Question 1, honorable period of military service 1, should be checked yes, as long as you have served honorably. Presuming that you don't have a DD-214 or more than 1 period of military service, questions 2 and 3 should be checked NA for not applicable. Part 6 asks about your separation information, as in whether or not you have been separated from the military. In your case, because you are at Fort Lee for AIT, question number 1, is the requester separated? Should be checked no. Question number 2 should be left blank because you were not separated. Question number 3 should be checked no. Page 4 is the most important page in the N426. It must be completed by a certifying official in the rank of 06 or higher. If you are at Fort Lee completing your N426, the certifying official will be your brigade commander. Part 7 remarks should state only the following: no derogatory information found. Part 7 should not contain any additional or different information. Part 8 is the certification to be completed by your brigade commander. It asks for their full name, rank, title, component, as well as their contact information. When your brigade commander signs the bottom of page 4, they must sign with a pen. An electronic signature will not work. The N400 is your application for naturalization. The section next to Part 1 on page 1 asks you to enter your 9-digit A number. This is the number found on your permanent resident card, also known as your green card. Your A number will appear on every single page of the N400, even those pages that are otherwise left blank. Question 1 asks you about the basis under which you are applying for naturalization. In our example, our applicant checked letter D, applying on the basis of qualifying military service. Please note that even if you qualify to apply for naturalization under another basis, such as being a resident for longer than 5 years, if you are applying using an N426 through the military, you should in fact check only box D, applying under the basis of qualifying military service. Part 2 at the bottom of page 1 asks for your legal name and your name exactly it appears on your permanent resident card. Please note that sometimes your green card or permanent resident card may have your name slightly different than it appears on other forms of identification. In our example, the names appear the same. However, if your green card has only your middle initial, for example, make sure that number 2 reflects that information. Part 2 continues on the next page. Question number 3 asks about any other names you may have used in the past. This question is common for people who are currently married and had a former unmarried or maiden name. If this applies to you, please put your maiden or former name. Number 4 asks if you would like to change your name in conjunction with this application for citizenship. If you do not want to change your name, please check no. No matter your choice, it is important that you make a selection and actually pick something. Questions 12 and 13 ask about disabilities or exemptions to the English language test. More likely than not, because you are serving in the United States military, you probably do not have a physical disability. If you do not, make sure that question 12 is checked no. Question 13 specifically applies to exemptions to the English language test. It asks if you were over a certain age, 50, 55, or 65. Chances are you have not just enlisted in the Army if you were any of these ages. Therefore, 13A, B, and C should all be checked no. Part 3 again asks if you need any special accommodations because of your disability. We are operating under the assumption that because you are newly enlisted in the Army, you do not have any disabilities requiring accommodations. If this is correct, please check no. Part 4 on page 3 asks for your contact information. In our example, our applicant does not have a daytime or evening phone number that is different from her cell phone number. If this is your case, you can do the same as our applicant did and list your cell phone number for boxes 1, 3, and 4. If you do not have a work phone number or do not know your work phone number, you can leave box 2 blank. For box 5, we recommend that you use your personal email address, as it is sometimes easier to access than your military email. Part 5, information about your residence. Here you must list every place you have lived in the last 5 years, starting with your current physical address, working backwards in time. If you are completing your N400 while at Fort Lee, number 1A should be your Fort Lee address. Your dates of residence should be the day you arrived to Fort Lee to present. Letter B asks for your mailing address. For this letter, we recommend that you use your home of record address so that your mail can go there instead of to Fort Lee. Part 5 continues on page 4. As you list your addresses for the last 5 years, it is important that you not have any gaps or overlapping dates. It is also important to understand that if you have lived in a foreign country during the last 5 years, you must also list that information. If you run out of space, you can continue to organize your address history on a separate sheet of paper, much like the example we have provided for you on the left-hand side of this slide. Part 6 should only be completed if one or both of your parents are U.S. citizens. If neither one of your parents is a U.S. citizen, all of Part 6 should be left blank. Part 7 on page 5 must be complete. It asks biographic information about you. Do not leave any of these questions blank. Part 8 requires you to list information about your former employment and schools you attended. You have to start with the most recent employer or school and work your way backwards, going back 5 years. Much like Part 5, Part 8 does not permit you to have any gaps. However, unlike Part 5, Part 8 allows you to have overlapping schools or employment, because you can work and go to school at the same time, or you can have 2 jobs at once. Number 1 in Part 8 should always be the U.S. Army, because that is your current job here at Fort Lee. You should list your Fort Lee address. Your date from should be the day you signed your contract. The date to should be to present, and your occupation should be soldier. For number 2 and number 3, go back in order and list the job or school that you attended immediately before joining the Army, and so forth. Part 8, information about your employment and schools you attended, is on page 6. Here, you must list all of the jobs and schools you have attended during the last 5 years. Just like Part 5, you will begin with your most recent school or employer and work backwards in time. Much like Part 5, you may not have any gaps in Part 8. However, different from Part 5, Part 8 does allow you to have overlapping dates, because you can go to school and work at the same time, or you can have 2 jobs at the same time. Number 1 should always state your branch of service. Here, U.S. Army. The date from will be the date you signed your enlistment contract. The date to will be present, and your occupation will be soldier. Much like Part 5, you may run out of space in Part 8. If this happens to you, remember to continue to organize your school and work history on a separate sheet of paper, much like the example we have provided for you here on the right hand of the slide. Because you may not have any gaps in Part 8, it is important that you even list periods of unemployment, no matter how brief. If you have any periods of unemployment, you will list the school or employer name as unemployed. Additionally, you will list your occupation as unemployed. If you have any schools to list in this section, your occupation will be student. On page 7, Part 9 asks about how many days you've been outside of the United States during the last 5 years. This section is often confusing to many people. We recommend that you begin by using a website called timeanddate.com and that you start with the chart beneath number 3. If you have traveled outside of the United States during the last 5 years, it is important that you start with the most recent trip and work backwards in time. In our example, our applicant did in fact leave the United States and took a short trip. On the first column, date you left the United States, the applicant stated June 20th, 2020. Date you returned to the United States, the applicant listed June 25th, 2020. Now this trip was only 5 days. So in the third column, did the trip last 6 months or more? The applicant checked no. In our example, our applicant traveled to Mexico and listed that on this chart. Her total days outside the United States for this trip were 5. Now also in our example, our applicant immigrated to the United States less than 5 years ago. It is very important that you count the number of days between 5 years ago and the date you immigrated to the United States when completing Part 9. Under the first column, date you left the United States, you will put your birthday, much like our applicant did here. And the second column, date you returned to the United States, you can list the date you immigrated here just as our applicant did. 5 years ago from today to the date our applicant immigrated to the United States was greater than 6 months. Therefore, she checked yes. Countries to which you traveled. Our applicant immigrated to the United States from Argentina and listed Argentina as a country to which she traveled. The total days outside the United States between 5 years ago today and the date our applicant immigrated to the United States is 1,100. Now that the chart beneath number 3 is complete, we can go back and answer questions 1 and 2. Question 1, how many days, 24 hours or longer, did you spend outside of the United States during the last 5 years? Here, we added together the 1,100 days with the 5-day trip for a total of 1,105 days. Number 2, how many trips, 24 hours or longer, have you taken outside the United States during the last 5 years? Now, even though we have 2 things listed beneath number 3, our applicant only left the United States 1 time. Therefore, she only took 1 trip, and the answer for box 2 is 1. If you have many dates of travel and are unsure of how many days you have spent outside the United States, you can find this information by going to i94.cbp.dhs.gov. Part 10 on the bottom half of page 7 asks information about your marital history. In our example, our applicant is married. So for question number 1, she checked the box that said married. Question number 3 asks how many times you've been married. Here, it is important to understand that USCIS wants to know about all of your marriages, including those that may have been annulled marriages to other people, marriages to the same person, marriages that may have ended in divorce or death. Put that total number in box 3. In our example, our applicant has only been married one time. Question number 4 asks if you are currently married. If you are currently married, you will list your current spouse's information for question 4. Part 10 continues on page 8. Question number 5 asks if your spouse is a U.S. citizen. In our example, the answer is yes. For that reason, our applicant also entered the information for question 6. If your current spouse is a U.S. citizen, complete the following. If your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, you must complete the information for question 7. Question 8 asks how many times your spouse has been married. Once again, this includes all prior marriages that your current spouse may have had. In our example, our applicant's spouse has only been married one time to her. Part 10, information about your marital history, continues at the top of page 9. Specifically, question 9 asks about your prior marriages. If you were married before, enter the information for question 9. If you have never been married, question number 9 should be entirely blank. Part 11, information about your children, begins on the bottom half of page 9 and continues through page 11. Question number 1 asks you to indicate your total number of children. You must include all children, including those who are alive, missing, deceased, born in the United States or in another country, children who are under or over the age of 18, children who are married or unmarried, children living with you or with someone else. You must also include any children you had while you were not married, your current stepchildren, and any legally adopted children. In our example, our applicant has one child and as such has put a number 1 in the box next to question number 1. For each and every child, you must provide the following information: their full name, their A number if any, their date of birth, their country of birth, their current address, and their relationship to you. In our example, our applicant's child is her biological child, and she is indicated biological. Part 12, additional information about you, begins on the bottom half of page 11 and continues through page 16. Part 12 is the longest part of the N400. For this reason, we are going to focus on general themes and on specific questions we want you to pay special attention to. First, if you look at the bottom of page 11, you'll see that the word ever is all bold capital letters. For purposes of this application, the word ever means at any time in your life, past or present. Please keep this in mind when you answer your questions so that you can do so honestly and accurately. Additionally, there are several questions in Part 12 that ask follow-up questions that can be left blank. For example, question number 4A asks, do you now have or did you ever have a hereditary title or an order of nobility in any foreign country? For example, were you a prince, a princess, a duke, or a duchess? Our applicant has checked no. 4B asks, if you answered yes, are you willing to give up any inherited titles or orders of nobility that you have in a foreign country at your naturalization ceremony? Here, it's important to pay attention to the first part of the question. If you answered yes. Our applicant answered no. Therefore, 4B is left blank. On page 12, part 12, I'd like to first direct your attention to question 9A, which asks, have you ever been a member of, involved in, or in any way associated with any organization, association, fund, foundation, party, club, society, or similar group in the United States or in any other location in the world? Many of our clients have told us that they believe this question is asking whether they've ever been the member of a political group or perhaps a religious organization. In reality, question 9A is much more broad. USCIS wants to know about any group you've ever participated in, even including school sports, science club, math club, band, choir, or anything of that nature. In our example, our applicant did in fact belong to her church choir. Therefore, she checked yes to 9A, and beneath 9B listed the name of the choir group. For purposes of the group, she put music and put her approximate dates of membership in that choir. On page 13, we are going to focus our attention on 3 questions. The first one is 15. Were you ever a member of, or did you ever serve in, help, or otherwise participate in any of the following groups? A. Military unit. The answer to this question should be yes, because you were in a military unit while you were at basic training, and now that you are in AIT, you are currently in a military unit. Question 17, were you ever a part of any group or did you ever help any group, unit, or organization that used a weapon against any person or threatened to do so? It's important to remember that just because you have weapons trainings and may use weapons in the military, this does not mean that you are using weapons against people or threatening to do so. Therefore, the answer to question 17 should be no. Because you answered 17 no, 17A and B should be left blank. Question 18. Did you ever sell, give, or provide weapons to any person or help another person sell, give, or provide weapons to any person? Again, just because you were working within the military and may have had weapons training does not mean that you were selling, giving, or providing weapons to people. Therefore, the answer to question 18 should be no. And accordingly, questions A and B should be left blank. Once you're done with page 13, you should have a total of 4 blank boxes, 17A and B and 18A and B. On page 14, part 12, I'd like to first direct your attention to question number 19. Did you ever receive any type of military or weapons training? You received military and or weapons training in basic and in AIT. Therefore, just like our client, you will check yes for question 19. Next, I'd like to direct your attention to questions 22 through 29. These questions are often confusing for our clients because they involve things such as offenses, citations, charges, convictions, arrests, and any type of law enforcement contact. It is extremely important that you answer these questions accurately and truthfully. USCIS will have access to your entire record and will have visibility of any type of law enforcement contact you have ever had. Therefore, you must include every type of incident you have ever had with law enforcement, even if it occurred many years ago, has been expunged, or is extremely minor in nature. For example, our applicant here received a speeding ticket in 2020. Using her case as an example, we will go through these questions in order. Question 22. Have you ever committed, assisted in committing, or attempted to commit a crime or offense for which you were not arrested? The focus here is on the word offense and the phrase not arrested. Speeding is an offense of the vehicle code, and people are typically not arrested for speeding. Therefore, our applicant checked yes for 22. 23. Have you ever been arrested, cited, or detained by any law enforcement officer for any reason? For question 23, the focus is on the word cited. If you have received a speeding ticket, like our client here in our example, you have received a citation. A speeding ticket is in fact a citation. Our applicant checked yes. 24. Have you ever been charged with committing, attempting to commit, or assisting in committing a crime or offense? In the case of a speeding ticket, the citation acts as the charging document. Therefore, our applicant checked yes. 25. Have you ever been convicted of a crime or offense? In our example, our applicant paid her fine. When she paid her fine, she had to admit guilt of speeding. Therefore, she was in fact convicted of speeding and checked yes for 25. 26. Have you ever been placed in an alternative sentencing or rehabilitative program, for example, diversion, deferred prosecution without adjudication, or deferred adjudication? These terms are not applicable to a speeding ticket. Our applicant was never placed in an alternative sentencing or rehabilitation program. Therefore, she checked no. 27A, have you ever received a suspended sentence, been placed on probation, or been paroled? Again, our example involves a speeding ticket and our applicant checked no. 27B is blank because 27A was no. 28A, have you ever been to jail or prison? Again, in our example, our applicant was not arrested. She merely received a simple speeding ticket, and she was not arrested, so she checked no for 28A. In the chart beneath 29, our applicant listed all of the information regarding her speeding ticket. The first column, why were you cited? We are going to focus on the word cited. She put speeding. And the second column, date cited, she put the date she received the ticket. Where were you cited? She put the city, state, and country where she received the ticket. Outcome or disposition of the citation. In our case, our applicant paid the fine and indicated as such. While you do not need proof of payment of your fine when you submit your N-400, you do need proof of payment at the time of your interview. If you don't have certified proof that you in fact paid your fine, you can contact the local courthouse where you paid your fine and obtain certified proof that way. If you don't recall when or where you received any speeding tickets or other traffic citations, oftentimes you can find them on the DMV website for the state in which you hold your driver's license. Page 15 has several questions we have to pay special attention to. Question 37 asks, have you ever served in the U.S. Armed Forces? Remember, the question is ever, any time in your life, past or present. The answer is yes. 38A, are you currently a member of the U.S. Armed Forces? The answer is yes, because you are currently in the Army at AIT at Fort Lee. 38B, if you answered yes to 38A, are you scheduled to deploy or go overseas? Unless you have orders to deploy or go overseas, the answer to 38B is no. 38C, if you answered yes, and what they mean is if you answered yes to 38A, are you currently overseas? Because you were stationed at Fort Lee, the answer to 38C is no. Question 44A at the top of page 16 asks if you're a male who lived in the United States anytime between your 18th and 26th birthdays. In our example, our applicant is a female and checked no. If you are in fact a male who lived in the United States between your 18th and 26th birthdays, check yes. If you have information regarding your Selective Service registration date and number, put it in the boxes beneath 44B. If you registered for the Selective Service but don't have that information, you can easily obtain it by going to the Selective Service System website listed here on the left-hand side of the screen. If for some reason you did not register for the Selective Service, you won't be penalized because you are in fact a member of the U.S. Armed Forces. Questions 45 through 50 ask about your allegiance and loyalty to the United States. Because you're a member of the Army and took similar oaths, questions 45 through 50 are most likely yes. Part 3 at the bottom of page 16 asks about your statement regarding the preparation of the N400. Because you have filled out the N400 yourself, even though we have reviewed it, you should select box 1A, stating that you can read and understand English, and you have read and understood all of the questions in the N400 and the answers. Part 13 continues on at the top of page 17. In box 3, you will sign and date your application and stop. Nothing else should be filled out on the N400 except for your A number. Pages 18, 19, and 20 should be blank except for your A number on the top right-hand corner. Once one of our attorneys has reviewed your packet for accuracy, you have 2 ways to submit your application to USCIS. The first is to mail it, certified mail, through the United States Post Office. The second way is to file online on the USCIS website listed on this slide. We recommend that you file online. If you choose to file online, you will upload all of your attachments, including your certified N426, a front and back copy of your green card, your most recent military orders, and your current marriage document if applicable. Many applicants want to know what they should do when they leave Fort Lee. The first thing you need to do when you leave Fort Lee is change your address with USCIS immediately. You can do this directly on the USCIS website or through the military info email address by sending them a copy of your new orders and your new address. It's very important that you keep USCIS updated about your current physical address at all times. The reason for this is that they can only interview where you are currently residing. So for example, let's say that you submit your N400 while you're at Fort Lee, PCS to Fort Bragg, and forget to update USCIS. USCIS will schedule your interview in Norfolk. However, even if you drive to Virginia from Fort Bragg for your interview, they will not interview once they learn that you are residing at Fort Bragg. They have to schedule your interview in North Carolina. So again, always keep USCIS updated on your current address. Everybody wants to know how long it will take USCIS to process their application. If you go to the website listed here, it will give you an approximate time frame for processing. Many clients want to know which family members they can sponsor and how soon they can sponsor them. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you can sponsor spouses and unmarried children. U.S. citizens, even naturalized citizens, can sponsor more categories of family members. You can explore those categories on the USCIS website. Please take note of the general information for USCIS. Their website is a great resource. Additionally, they have a military hotline and a general military email address specifically for our service members. I hope this brief has been helpful. Helping our clients become U.S. citizens is one of the most fulfilling parts of our job. We look forward to helping each and every one of you. Please don't forget to send us a picture from your naturalization ceremony. Good luck to all of you.